Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week is the Universal Audio Century Tube Channel Strip. The Century Tube Channel Strip is a vintage style recording chain that you could use in the unison preamp slot of your Apollo or Arrow interface, as well as operating natively within your host DAW. The basic idea is to give you a good quality recording chain that gives you a vintage style warmth through the use of a tube preamp emulation and optical compression, as well as very transparent EQ for processing your audio signal. The primary objective here is to give you something that becomes a more solid foundation for you to work from when you get to the mix stage. What you'll find with this channel strip is that instantly you get this warming character and a bit of presence on the top end just from the tube preamp stage. You got an EQ that's voiced in such a way that it can be used on almost any instrument. Works really well with a mid-band semi-parametric and two shelving EQs, so just a very basic EQ setup, and a very transparent sounding optical compressor, which very much sounds like an LA2A style optical compressor, and an output gain stage. If you're operating this within the Unison channel strip, it also works well with the gain stage mode. So if you go and select the proper channel that you have the plugin, the Century channel strip assigned on, you could just hold your preamp there for a couple, and you'll notice that this gain stage lights up. So now if I toggle here, I can now adjust the input level as well as the output level, and I can do this all from the front of the Apollo or Arrow interface. So that allows you to just toggle through the different gain stages. Otherwise, the basic setup is pretty simple. You have a low gain and a high gain. So the low gain is primarily for condenser mics. The high gain is primarily for dynamic mics and ribbon mics. You have a mic line selection, so all these features obviously map also to your Apollo interface, so you can toggle those in and out. You have the high-pass filter, which is set up to 80 hertz. You have a phase inversion or a polarity switch for the input. You have a 20 dB pad available as well. So again, all of that maps to your interface if you want to switch it there, or if it's easier to switch it the way I am, you could do it with a mouse. And the level drives the amount of tube saturation. So you have the input gauge stage, and then this will determine how much you're actually saturating the tube. There's an overload LED here on the input to show you when the gain is too much coming in from the basic preamp, and then also how much you're saturating the signal post preamp stage. Directly after that is an EQ. On the EQ, you have a high frequency shelf set to 10K, plus minus 12 dB, pretty straightforward. On the bottom end, you have the same thing, a shelf on the low end set to 110 hertz, can be placed into circuit just by hitting the in-out switch down at the bottom. And you have a mid-band parametric, semi-parametric, so you don't have a Q control, but as you boost more, the Q bandwidth will narrow, or same as if you attenuate. So it'll start out a little bit broader and get narrower as you boost more. You have frequency selections in the mid-range from 300 up to 7.2K. So it gives you a good range of zooming in on a frequency that may be bothering you, maybe a boxiness in the voice or something, or maybe you want to bring out a little bit more richness of the tonal character of an acoustic guitar. So it's really perfectly voiced and set up for those types of things. For pretty much any instrument, it works really well. There's also an opto limiter here, which is very much LA2A-like. The compression knob here, as you wield this up or dial this up, you'll get more compression. So it's very much like the peak reduction knob that you get. Again, you could decide to use it or not. It's very transparent. The gain reduction, if you just follow the meter, seems a little bit more responsive, so it seems to recover a little bit more quickly. But it also has a slower, longer total release. So it's a multi-stage release characteristic, which is more or less what an opto limiter like an LA2A will do. Then you have an output gain stage here, which is purely a digital output gain stage. So this is just to balance the output. So the opto leveler is actually auto gain makeup. So you just have the compression knob, and it will automatically make up gain based on the amount of gain reduction. and just operate from there. For the most part, when you're using it, you'll find that you may just make subtle adjustments, plus minus on the output, unless you're doing some radical EQ boosts. And other than that, or radical, gain driving into the tube stage. But other than that, it just sounds amazing. So let's have a listen. Let's switch over to Pro Tools here. I have a vocal set up here. And so let's start with this bypass, and let's just kind of go through some of the basic settings here, just to kind of show you what this is all about. So I think I have the vocal soloed up, all set to go. Here we go.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line.
Okay, so that's without any processing here. So now let's kind of bring it in. So with no equalization, compression, this is just the differential AB it just driving through the tube preamp.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road.
So a very subtle difference. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to put in the 80 hertz roll off here. So we have that in place, and now I'm just going to drive a little bit of level, see if I could push a little saturation into the tubes.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur.
All right, so now you could hear it start to bring in a bit of body and air into the voice. Just to match the gain a little bit better here, just do a quick AB.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur.
So what you'll notice here, and again, it's still a little bit louder, but what you'll notice here is that the imaging starts to come into focus. You can start to hear the vocal or see the vocal a little bit better. So now let's go in with the EQ and just kind of drive in a little top end to see if we could bring in some air, a little bit of body, and maybe find a mid-range frequency that helps to make the vocal pop out a little bit better.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur. Just like a blur. Running out of time, running out of reasons, running out of money, don't know what I was thinking.
Could take one of two directions here. I could probably dip away a little bit of the boxiness.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur.
So that sounds pretty good. The other option would be to push a little bit more upper mids to kind of shift some of that tonal boxiness. And let's leave that just as is. You could hear just how smooth that top end shelf is. Very smooth, yet brings out like a nice character. It's a little bit of an edge to it, but it works really well here. So let's go on to the compressor here, to the optical compressor. I want you to really notice the gain reduction here as I start to bring it up, and notice in particular the recovery and how smoothly it recovers around the vocal.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur. Just like a blur. Running out of time, running out of reasons, running out of money, don't know what I was thinking.
So you could see how it really draws out the sound of the vocal just with some very simple basic settings. It's not complicated. That's the purpose of it. It's meant to be simple, quick, but you can hear the sound just sonically. It works amazingly well and creates like a real smooth sound. So imagine if you're recording with this, you could capture your voice instead of having sort of a dead, more or less generic sound that you're working with from scratch. You could put something in there that fundamentally sounds good, even if you're not going as radical with the settings here. Just the tube warming, the compression, kind of balance out the levels a little bit, and bring in a little bit of air on the original voice. And once you've captured that, then you have something foundational that you can work with really well. So here, let's just take a look at this. Let's listen to this in the context of the mix.
You went your way, and I went mine, dripping slowly down the road, walking a line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur.
You see, just with this simple channel strip, I'm replacing a bunch of plugins over here and fundamentally getting a very quick sound that I could work with in the mix. Maybe a little de-essing or something after this, and we might be good to go. You can also use this in a parallel chain. So here I could, if I wanted to just overdrive this, you could see here that I can run this into a mic setup, so I can operate it in the mic setup. You just want to be careful, match your gain here, make sure your gain is not too much, and then just, drive a little bit of heavy saturation into it and compression. You see here's some pretty hefty EQ, so let's see what this is like.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking the line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur. Just like a blur. Running out of time, running out of reasons, running out of money, don't know what I was thinking.
So it's not appropriate, obviously, for this song, but you get a basic idea. Like, you could also overdrive this if that's something that interests you, and then you could run the low or the high gain, which would give you even more saturation, and you could just have the ability to just overdrive it. It's a pretty cool little setup, and in fact, I've kind of experimented with a bunch of different things, even kind of playing around with it on the mix bus, and found it to be even helpful there, just as like a simple mix bus compression. So mix bus compressor EQ. So all I did was just do a little dip at 300 there to help the low end to drop, 110 boost, slight boost up at 10K on the high end. I'm bringing in a little bit of drive for some warmth, just to the point before clipping, but I could bring it in to clip some of the transients, a little bit of compression, and we're pretty good to go. Have a listen to this.
You went your way, and I went mine, drifting slowly down the road, walking a line. And all these cars are passing me by, and all these dreams, they seem like a blur. Just like a blur. Running out of time, running out of reasons, running out of money, don't know what I was thinking. Trying to get away, trying to get back, trying to start again, trying to get back to living. Well, if it's not love, it's not bad. I'm trying to get back the best I ever had.
What I like about it, just with the tube saturation here, just a little bit of that tube warmth, what it does, because I'm not using any radical settings here, so it's not compressing a lot or anything. It's just like a uh, like a subtle warming, but also the imaging and the clarity. A little bit more of a mastering kind of process, the way that I'm using it here. But the clarity of the mix just kind of opens up. It's a very cool one, very powerful. Can be used on bass, guitars, vocals, and although primarily designed as a recording chain, you could hear just sonically the characteristic sound that's very vintage-like, yet very clean and transparent. So it gives you something that is really solid and records well. It gives you a good solid sound that you can build from as a foundation for the mix with individual sounds that you record. And that's why it's plugin of the week. Mixing by mic, plugin of the week. Universal Audio, Century Tube Channel Strip.